Are you sure these people want us?
I know they do.
You can call me Mama. Oh, Lord.
If we can't wrap our arms around the most vulnerable, then what do we have? Noise! And the children can't take the noise anymore.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another bonus episode of the GEB America podcast. I'm your host, David Groves. I'm joined today by Josh Weigel, the director of a really great new movie that is out on the 4th of July weekend. It's just really a phenomenal film. I had the pleasure of seeing it recently. Sound of Hope. It's the true story of Possum Trot, a little East Texas town that an incredible rural church did an amazing thing, and they worked together to adopt 77 kids out of the East Texas foster care system. Josh joins us from Texas. Josh, good morning.
Morning. So good to be here, David. Thank you. Appreciate all this.
Well, we definitely, when we first started talking with the folks over at Angel, they said, hey, this new movie's coming out. You know, we really want to give you an opportunity to chat with Josh. We were excited to take us back. Now, I understand you've actually moved to Texas, I guess, temporarily to work on the story. What inspired you and your wife Rebecca? I know she's a co-producer, I believe. What inspired you guys about this story to move there and take on this story and create this film?
Yeah, Rebecca, she produced and wrote with me, and I directed the film, and it's been about 8 years in the works now. So it's something that kind of it just sort of hijacked what was going on in our lives at the time. We were pursuing another project that was getting a lot of traction, and it got to a point where it felt like this story was more important, and we sort of put everything on hold and felt like we need to really look closely. Rebecca was immediately convinced, and she found out about the Martins. She'd heard something at some point. We all kind of knew there was this community somewhere that had adopted all of these children, and when she was looking for a speaker, she was working in Los Angeles in that whole sphere, foster adopt, and all the things related there in Los Angeles, and was looking for a speaker for an event coming up and found Bishop Martin. And so connected with him, and in just a matter of days, we felt like this is a story that must be told. The more we heard it firsthand, and the work that had been going on in our lives, that we had adopted a couple of our children as well. And so we were sort of fresh in this space and realizing and learning more and more about how the foster system affects so many areas of our lives, so many of the major issues that break our hearts, homelessness, prison population, children who are trafficked. All these things were connected to the foster system. And so as we learned that, found out about this story, it just took over. We felt like, there's purpose here. We felt led and compelled to tell it, which was a challenge because of the scale of the story. You've got 77 kids who were adopted. Mm-hmm. You have 22 families who did the adopting. And trying to get that to work on film was a huge issue. There's a lot of interest actually in the sort of the faith-based filmmaking world. Focus on the Family had a book written about it. So there was just a lot of interest, but I think a lot of people were trying to figure out, how do you get this to work as a movie? And we took it on and felt like it's worth figuring that out because it's so impactful.
So let's talk about what some of those challenges were. I mean, I'm sure you had to go through and hear all the stories and understand kind of everybody's, kind of where they're coming from.
Right.
Because everybody has that backstory and the challenge of, do we do this? Do we not do this? And, what were the things that surprised you as you kind of dug in and met people?
I think with foster care, for one thing, it's this background thing. We all know about it, but very generally. And most people are afraid of it. Most people feel like it's something that like Green Beret Christians do, or people who, are specially trained, specially interested, or equipped, and one of the first things you realize when you meet the Martins in this community is that they're just like everybody else. This is an average community of people that felt the need. Donna, First Lady Donna, was the first to, really dive into this. She felt compelled by God to do this in the first place. So she sort of broke ground and started it all. And, these aren't people that, they don't have, child welfare experience or master's degrees in these things. I mean, these are just people that have hearts and felt that this was a clear thing God calls us to, and we just need to do it. They didn't ask a lot of questions. And so, I'm struck by that because it's easy to see a need once you do learn about it and talk yourself out of it. And foster care is classic for this. There's a lot of trauma involved. And so you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know much about the children that you do get placed with. And so there's a lot of things like that this community didn't get caught up in. They just felt like this is what God said to do, and we're going to do it, and we're going to trust that He's going to be there for us as we do and move along. So powerful example of just diving into the hard stuff.
Yeah, had the pleasure of seeing the movie prior to our interview. My wife and I, as some of the listeners probably have heard, and I didn't know that about you and your wife, as we did adopt out of the foster system several years ago. And the challenges, just watching the movie and thinking of, oh, yeah, I get it. There are so many, you don't know about the trauma. Every child reacts differently. Some close down, some act out. And of course, there's a big difference between younger children and older children. Younger children can't tell you. The whole nonverbal is such a big issue. And so I think that from the standpoint of a film viewer, I feel like it can be one of those that really opens your eyes to not just the problem, but seeing that you don't have to be, as you said, the Green Beret Christian.
Yeah.
Jesus calls us to help and take care of the orphan and the widow. He doesn't say, after you've had the training or once you've spent time with the Father, So let me ask you this. So people are going to go see this. If you're listening to the podcast prior to the 4th of July, there's some early screenings coming up. If you're listening, in July, it's out. You need to go and see it. I really, really do encourage you to. What is it you want people to take from this? What is your hope for the average moviegoer that grabs a big thing of popcorn and goes and sits down because they want to support a film like this that is telling a really redemptive story? Yeah.
I mean, that's the right thing to do. First of all, go get the popcorn, go see this as a movie. That's why it was made. I'm a filmmaker first. When it comes to these things, sometimes these kinds of movies are made because of the issue. And it's almost like you feel it's more important to get the cause, the issue or the cause highlighted and create awareness and all those things that are really important and good. But this is a movie first, and we've made sure that it's something that will be deeply entertaining. And I think it's rare that people feel deeply in movies anymore. I think that it's sadly true, but this is something where there's so many things you're going to experience. I mean, as we've tested this and as we've done pre-screenings, the audiences are really experiencing a lot. There's laughter, there's crying, you're moved, you're challenged. So I first want people to know that this isn't us, trying to compel people to go deal with an issue, first at least. Like we know this is not for everyone, and the way that people may get involved can be very different. It doesn't have to be just you either foster, adopt, or nothing. And so, first of all, it turned out to be a really powerful story, really powerful movie, and I'm grateful for that. But what we hope people will do from there is take their experience and move into action in some way or another. I mean, my feeling is that we are all able and called to do something. We, like you mentioned the scripture in James, and it's not a scripture, a command pointed at just a subset of Christians. This is something we all do, and I want to begin that conversation again that is critical when it comes to the things in the world that God wants us to do. And how do we get involved in those things? How do we actually live out our faith in a practical way? And we're actively involved in the problems of the world around us. So I think that there is a way for everybody to meet the needs of the orphans and widows in the spirit of that, the vulnerable. And people may not understand that there's an array of things that you can do. And so we're going to connect people to ways to get involved with a website. After the film, you'll be able to connect. Mm-hmm. And you're going to find out how you can get your church involved to do basically what Bennett Chapel did. You're going to be able to find out information on how to foster and adopt, what that means, what that looks like, how to, start that process, and in many areas even be connected to agencies and people working in that space in your area. And then also find out how you can just get involved in other ways, meeting needs. A lot of kids end up in the foster system or staying in the foster system because of needs that just need to be met. If a family doesn't have a bed, and so they won't be reunited with their child until they get a bed or a refrigerator or, ridiculous things like that. Yep. And so the hope is to get people into the lives of these families that are in crisis and build relationship and prevent these kids from going into the system in the first place, when that's possible and safe. So that's what we hope. A movie that's really powerful, and that they will leave that movie ready to get involved in some way and kind of refresh that call that's always been there to meet the needs of these kids who are suffering. I mean, people don't probably know the numbers, but there's about 400,000 children in the foster system in America. And there's 100,000 of them that need families right now.
Right.
And just on one positive note, there's 400,000 churches roughly in America as well. So, you've got, if 1 in 4 churches decided to adopt one child, the problem disappears overnight. And so that's just to kind of give us context. This is not an insurmountable problem. We're not talking about millions of children that are in need.
Yeah, and for those of you that are not that familiar with all the different facets that go into foster placement and adoption, there are a lot of ways. I know when we were in the process, which we were in an elongated process because of the COVID pandemic, things come to a screeching halt. Court cases were over Zoom, and the thing I will tell you is, there's so many things. Maybe you have the means to where you can just buy diapers and you can buy pull-ups and you can buy mattresses and drop things off. One of the things that is a real blessing is, maybe you can't adopt or you can't foster, but you can take those kids for 2 or 3 hours and take them to the amusement park or the mall and give the foster parents a chance to do other things. Give them a break. When we would get that, we would go shopping. We go clothes and grocery shopping, because it's, as anybody that's a parent knows, going to a store with a bunch of kids is, not always the most delightful thing to do. Mm-hmm. So you can do respite. There are things you can do, and certainly, like you said, getting your church involved is a huge thing. So let me ask you a couple other questions about the film, because you're right. It's a great movie. It's a movie. It's entertaining. Talk about the casting a little bit. At the end of the movie, spoiler alert, you get to meet all of the real. You get to see video of most everybody, including the Reverend and First Lady. And your casting, I thought of them. Obviously, they were a little younger when this all happened. Was spot on. I mean, it was great. You felt like you already knew them. Yeah, no. So I think you're bringing up one of the most important issues to me was the casting, and I just say across the board. The reason we even moved to East Texas was we were deep into development of the screenplay, and felt like it was in a solid place, but that it just hadn't reached the depth that it needed to. And for me, that's what was critical about making this into a movie. It's worth making into a movie if we can get real enough. And honestly, we had a really hard time
with the usual suspects in the faith-based arena when they, it comes to the studios and companies that are usually working in that space. And they, it's hard for a story that's too authentic or that's very authentic to, to find support there. And so and that wasn't my goal. We just wanted to get the right people around it. I don't even think of this as a faith-based story, but it is grounded in a community where church is the foundational part of it. And so it's natural to it, but we needed to make sure that everything was authentic as possible. And that if we're going to go into what these kids are dealing with, it needs to feel real enough that, you take it seriously. And it's not rated R or anything like that, but I wanted people to feel the pain. I wanted people to feel what it was like to care for kids that have come out of that. But ultimately that it's redemptive and hopeful, because that's the reality. It's true. When God says go do something, he doesn't just leave you in mired in a battle that's just going to be dark and discouraging all the way through. So we made sure that we got the best available, and it took a long time for the casting to settle out. We actually cast 2 leads originally and got through a whole week of filming with them. And very early in that filming, we could tell this was no longer something that was connecting. Like, we were not on the same page. And, as difficult as it was, I felt truly like to really save what this movie is meant to be and what we all had in our hearts to see happen, we needed to address this. And so we ended up amicably parting ways, and we had to recast within days. So Nika King was on board to be another character. She had already taken off, actually. She was in the air when we were making this decision. She took off in a supporting role and landed in the lead role. And then we also had Demetrius sort of on the back burner as well. We auditioned him, and anyway, it just worked out to where they were so right for this. And it's one of the things we hear most about is just the performances are so encouraging as a director. And it's amazing to see how they're affecting people, and what Nika and Demetrius and Deanna and Jillian and Elizabeth did was phenomenal. I mean, they just really captured the deep pain and the highs and all the things in between. Yeah. So it was worth the struggle. It was costly, but I think it's why we're even having this discussion today, because I don't know if the movie would have been worth, this kind of attention, honestly, if we hadn't done this.
Well, I thought that their performances were authentic. A lot of times, and you kind of touched on that a little bit, especially in the faith-based world. And it's not a knock on it, but sometimes the casting is fraught with a lot of acting faux pas. And what I mean by that is, you look at that and go, these people don't seem like they're from that area. Like, I believed in watching it, like, they are playing such great roles of truly what is community in East Texas. It didn't come off like, okay, these are some folks from LA trying to play a role, and they are struggling to understand how to do it because they're not familiar with the culture and with the community. Right. And if you are as a believer, as somebody who is a follower of Christ, I mean, you can definitely feel as you watch the movie, the people in it are so authentic with exactly how it's like. I mean, if you grew up and I grew up in rural America, drop everything and pray. People talk, very real. And I appreciated that about the film, because when you have that distraction, you can fall out of, being in line to understand how the story is being told, because you're just so, off put, so to speak.
That's true.
Now, you mentioned the rating. It's PG-13. I would assume, the thematic elements, it's very dramatic. Obviously, you can only imagine if you've seen the trailer, there's, teenagers throwing things and breaking plates, and I mean it's real.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I want people to know I'm not one to, overexpose things in some sense. It's not about being actual. There's a way to be real and authentic without the blood and the guts, and that's what's beautiful about filmmaking. You can communicate a lot without having to go fully into it. And so, that's the things that happen to these kids is so disturbing. So many of them were not just traumatized by losing family, but they had gone through really horrifying abuse. Mm-hmm. And so, people need to know what they went through. We don't take you there and show you all of these kinds of things, but you're there enough, you're close enough. And I felt like, creatively, we need to make it cinematic enough to where it works as a movie. But I think this is where a lot of the typical faith-based filmmaking and entertainment falls short is, for one, I think the choices of our stories are often just disconnected, from what's really, really important, in the time that we live. The choices are often for inspiration or, maybe there's an important issue that it's addressing, but it's a little hard to handle it authentically. So you have to understand what cinema is first. And then, that is a huge factor in the choices that you make when you're depicting these kinds of things and starting with the story, making the choice to start with which story in the first place. And so we try to pick films and projects that by nature work really well on screen or will. And that's what this did. And so it's got all of the things about it. And I was really hooked early on by hearing what these kids live through and knowing that this is common, and then having my own personal experience raising kids who have gone through trauma of their own. And it's so important. It's one of the most important issues today that people aren't thinking a lot of, and then having the opportunity to bring it to the screen in a way that honors it and is honest about it. I think people sense that. So we're not going too far that it's scary and disturbing, but you will feel things that maybe aren't typically felt in films that tackle these kinds of things. And that's what I'm proud of, that part of it especially. I think that people all felt the need to do that, and everybody just stepped up and took it seriously and really did everything that they could do with what they had, whether it's acting or, any other element that they brought.
Before we wrap up, I want to remind folks, we'll get all the info for you in the show notes. You'll be able to find website information, find theaters in your area, as well as how to connect with Josh and others in Angel Studios. So a question I have is, tell us maybe a story, something that happened in filming, maybe something that was like funny or challenging, or anything that just kind of sticks out to you that is kind of something we're not going to know from watching the movie, but might have transpired that was maybe a God moment. I don't know, something that happened during the principal shooting.
Yeah. Oh boy, there's so many times that that God came through and really I think what's most important, what I could say, is that we felt such purpose in this. Like, we were all very gripped by this story and the need for it, and it was just so clear over the years that there was something about this story that was really important, and that God was determined to bring it to fruition. And so we would be facing, insurmountable things that literally would have sunk many productions. And what I talked about was probably the biggest one, where we had to recast. I mean, that was a decision. We lost 7 days of filming because of that. And so being able to regroup and respond to a massive problem like that. And we had to do that throughout. I just am so grateful that God came through, that people stayed on board. People didn't, run away when we started to feel the storm around us. And because of that, the film, I think it retains this power. I mean, I was very confident that God was going to do something supernatural with this. I mean, I'll tell you, you are going to experience God, and this is all Him. I mean, we have made this movie at a time in history where there's a lot of things converging. The children who are suffering are always on God's mind. He's always seeing them. Their cries are always heard in His ears. We're the ones who aren't noticing it. So He has had this in His sights for a long time. And we are just part of, I think, a convergence around children that need us. And what happens is you pull in people who are saying, I follow Jesus, but they're ignoring this or they don't know about it. And I think you're going to feel swept into something that's way bigger than this movie. It's way bigger than you or me. This is God saying, I'm no longer going to sit back. Not that He ever was, but not challenge my followers and compel people to come to this need. And so it might just feel like the movie just flows and you're not thinking about all the struggle that happened along the way, but just know that it was a battle throughout. And now something is being brought to the screen that has real power. And we're hearing this from so many people. So you're going to experience something really dynamic. And I think supernatural, and that's been a prayer of my life, is that people would feel God when whatever I'm doing, whatever work I get blessed to make, that's part of it. People experience Him. And so I think we're seeing that evidence now, and I'm really just blessed and excited about that.
Well, I encourage our listeners and viewers this 4th of July weekend and into July to go and take a moment to see just a really well-made film. Like Josh said, it's a movie first, and I can tell you, you will be pulled into the story. You will be, you won't get bored, and you definitely are going to feel something. I believe that. And for those of you that want to know more about the film, check the show notes. But also, Josh, tell folks how they can get more information on the film here in the days leading up to the release, and also how to connect with you, your social handles, anything like that you want to give. Well,
so it opens July 4th. You can actually go July 3rd too. So it's really important, and I'm hearing that it's selling out, and that tickets are. It may even be hard in your area to get into a theater. So, which is huge for us. But I just encourage everyone, go out that weekend. It's really important. And I'm not one to ask people to go see a movie that out of guilt or obligation. I really, I want you to know that I believe you're going to enjoy this. There's going to be something for you, but we are up against the typical summer movies, and there is a practical need. If we don't perform, then the movie doesn't stay in theaters very long, and it doesn't, have the impact that we want. We want this film. It's always been more than a movie. And that's our hope and our prayer, is that it just gets out there. It grows, the interest grows, and the exposure grows. So if we flood theaters July 4th, and, this to us is a show of force for kids. This is a show of force that we're following Jesus where He already is. And, it's a film. You're going to go see a movie, all of that, do it July 4th. I hope you'll be there and support it. But we really believe this is a tool that's going to last and for years to come. But we need this wave to rise right now. So check your local area and go see the movie with your friends, your families, your communities, churches, whoever.
Definitely. How can people connect with you on social handles and whatnot?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. We're on Facebook. So the film itself, Sound of Hope, you'll find that on Facebook easily. Angel Studios, you can find all kinds of information about the film there on the website. And if you go to Facebook, any of those ads you'll see will connect you to a way to buy the tickets. Yep. But yeah, JPeastry is my handle for Instagram, and you just search around a bit, you'll find us one way or another. And Rebecca Weigel, we're married and work together. She produced and wrote with me, so she's a huge part of this, and you'll find her there too.
How rewarding is that? You get to do this creative art that we all love together.
Yeah, thank God we work really well together, and I think each of our strengths just makes the whole product better and stronger. So yeah, it was a surprise too. That wasn't her original goal back in 1998 when we ended up in Los Angeles. But after a handful of years, we started working together on short films, and it just became clear, like, this is the way we need to do these things. So yeah, it's been an awesome experience.
Well, I appreciate you taking a moment to join us from Texas, America, where you've been shooting the film and preparing for this really big 4th of July weekend. In the show notes, you'll find everything to our listeners. I want to thank all of those that are listening on the familiar podcast platforms like Apple, Spotify, and Deezer and Audible, but also want to say thank you to our Pray.com family that is also listening. And be sure to share this podcast. Tell your friends. Say, hey, you need to hear about this movie, so that you're looking for something to do on 4th of July weekend anyway. And in the U.S., almost everybody's got a 4-day weekend. So let's do as Josh said. Let's support the program, the film, because it really is about raising the awareness and doing things for kids, because the plight is big. But it can be, as you said, Josh, it just takes one at a time. You and your wife are a testament to that, and we've been blessed and challenged in our adoption journey. And but not everybody has to do that. Sometimes just a huge bag of Pampers, man, helps. Just a gift card to go to dinner helps.
Yeah, you'd be surprised at how powerful that kind of help is, and meeting needs, those kinds of things. So Care Portal is an organization that we're working with that connects people to these families in crisis on the ground. And so wherever Care Portal is, you have a way to actually find these families that are in need. And you could be a part of keeping a child out of the system, or reuniting them with a safe, loving family that just has issues that they've been battling.
Yep.
And so it's exciting to know there's so many ways that we can address this together.
Well, I want to thank you again for joining us, Josh, and we look forward to seeing other projects. We'll stay, definitely in touch as you continue, you and Rebecca continue creating great art and telling great stories. For our listeners, I want to thank you for joining us for this special bonus episode of the GEB America podcast. Remember, every Tuesday we drop a new episode. Be sure to follow, like, and share, and hit that bell on YouTube so that you can stay up to date whenever we release a new episode. And we'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your week.
What's happening with Possum Trot could mean a huge change for the system.